In Jamaica growing up, music was always a significant part of my life. There was, of course, music on the radio. I remember the radio stations back there, RJR and JBC. They used to play fantastic music. I remember music, for example, like Millie Small, when that came out. When that came out with My Boy Lollipop, I so remember it when that came out. So music was always there for me. But the main place that I experienced music was in the church. The Church of God of Prophecy in Top Mountain, sometimes called Paul Mountain, in the same St. Catherine, Jamaica. And it wasn't sophisticated back in the early days. Of course, you'd have a banjo and maybe a sort of box guitar. In the early days, there weren't any drums and certainly no other sophisticated type of music.
In the Pentecostal church where I was, it was tambourine.
We played our tambourine and it's, oh my gosh, it's sweet. And Brother Ken's mother, Sister Gregory, when she plays a tambourine, you have to stop. Mother Gregory that just died there. She could play tambourine. And when we go up to their church up Red Hills, when we don't need no more music because it's like she's doing the bass in timbre and the next one is on tenor and the tambourine reacted so heavily that everybody began to move in the Holy Spirit.
That sort of rhythm that came from hearing the tambourine playing whilst the congregation was clapping their hands, but it wasn't just a 1-3 rhythm that you get in a lot of European churches. It was 2-4, and just to explain that, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. In predominantly white churches, it's they clap on the 1 and 3, so it's 1, 3, 1, 3. But in our churches, it was 1, 2, 3, 4. There's just a bigger feel to it, man. More energy, more. I don't even know what to call it. There's just more of it.
That's what it was. We had rhythm, and it was the tambourines.
Tambourines, I was a tambourine player. I tell you what, I got on camera now and say, I challenge anybody, young or older sister in the church, I challenge you to me and tambourine. Nobody's taking me. I had rhythms for days, you know.
Tambourines. And so the tambourine would take the place of drums. And so one would be playing a tambourine, one was slapping the tambourine, and it was really good. And then as I got older, I thought I really would love to play. But even before that, to sort of for rhythm in the church, we used to clap. So now we would go like, Jesus is real, he's real, that sort of thing. But back in the day, it was Jesus is real,
Syncopation and cross rhythm, all those super sophisticated elements of music that were just displayed on a daily and weekly basis without being taught it.
Our parents couldn't go, some of them, they weren't all Pentecostal when they came to England. From back home, there were Methodists and all these things, and that courtesy of the scriptures, you came to your home and your home received you not. So a lot of them couldn't worship in what they call the nominal churches at the time. So they had to find school halls. So obviously you couldn't have pianos in school halls because they didn't have them. So that gave rise to portable instruments. So if you look at all the black churches, that's where it really started out because you plugged your guitar in your little amp and it went your way. Yeah. So that's where it really came from. So you didn't have the big organs like you did in the Methodist church. So they had to make do, and that's how it happened. You packed it down, you packed the chairs away, and you went home, and it was a school building.
My earliest memory of church, we went to a church in Welling Hall, and it was a community hall where they played bingo and stuff like that. And when we got there, before we could even start service, we had to sweep out the cigarette butts, clean everything down, and then start service. And one of the things for me, I remember when service was going on, the caretaker would come in and flick the lights to say, we've got to get out. And sometimes we literally turn the lights up and trying to find our way out in the dark and stuff.
A lot of times we had school halls, so when you was playing music, you could hear everybody tapping the same beat. Vroom, vroom, and you're there playing away, and there was that is something that doesn't leave you, you know.
So we created like this percussive kind of like sound, banging the back of the benches and using our feet on the floor because the floor was wooden. So we got this kind of like boom, cat, you know, with the bang in the back. So there's about 8 of us just lined up, and the front bench, and we'll play, and the girls were playing tamarines. You had the choir, you know, the congregation singing, the musicians, you know, it's just like in the groove playing. So church was very influential in my life.
There wasn't a worship team, hello? There wasn't a worship team back in the day. Now, that is something that I'm very conscious of. So it means that the whole congregation lifted up their voices and they sang. It wasn't set apart where they'd fold up their hand and decide whether the singer was good or not, or whether they were in harmony or not. The whole congregation didn't watch nobody. They all offered up their praises to the Lord. That is true worship. I'm here to tell you.
And it wasn't a case of being taught these songs through the written medium of like traditional West Indian notation. It was all by rote, it was all by ear. And what you got from that was feel. You got the emotional background that came with that. You know, you got that essence behind the groan, you got the reason behind the moan that went along with what is called melismatic singing, you know, not just straight singing, the melisma that comes from experience.
I remember Lady Sister Flary, and she used to play the piano. So you can imagine hymns of glorious praise and the banner hymn, and she would have it on the piano. So she was playing the notes. So, you know, those things were written, those hymns were written in a very sort of English form way. But still, you know, from Jamaica, they would put the colour to it, you know, and obviously, you know, people would interpret those songs in different ways. So you would hear in the audience one lady going up, another going down, and never the harmonies to meet. But that was all fun of church anyway.
Musicians that have grown up in church will be able to relate to the fact that you learned how to play in every key throughout the whole spectrum, whether it was major or minor, augmented, diminished, you name it. We learned because the congregations would start singing in the key of C, and before the song's finished, they're in the key of G, because they wouldn't always maintain the same key. So it was a really good education.
Once a month we had what we called Lord's Supper, which a lot of people must know, like the eating of the bread and the drinking of the wine. But we done Lord's Supper and washing of the saints' feet. So we used to have this thing where we wash each other's feet. The women would go to one section, men would stay in one section. And what would happen, I could do basic riffs on the bass. I could do my basic riffs on the rhythm guitar. I could keep a rhythm on the drums. So the excitement of washing, I could go off, put down my guitar, and somebody else would play the guitar while I was getting my feet washed. When I come back, probably the drummer was getting his feet washed, so I go on the drums. And then as the weeks and months went by, during them services, you play at least 2 instruments every service. Sometimes it just happens you play 3, so I could be playing guitar, bass, and drums all in the same service, and that was exciting. It brings a smile to my face thinking about them days.
Back in the day, we used to have building programs. They were the thing, man. You used to travel all over the place for building programs.
Program was the instrument that was used to make money, basically, to get people. That's how churches were built, by collecting money, whether going to the pub or whatever, or in the church, putting on a program. They call them concerts now, I think. And the program would, of course, attract singers, and then people would pay. Sometimes jokingly, they would pay to stop you from singing, sometimes before you started, and sometimes whilst you're singing. somebody will walk up and pay some money to stop you from singing, and that could go on for quite a while. The main purpose, of course, was the raising of the funds, but people were absolutely enjoying themselves whilst they were giving their money.
They'd come in and then they'd boost. So it would be like, 10 pence this person to sing, 5 pence that person don't sing, £1 don't say nothing, sit down, and the night would string out, and all of the items you couldn't get through because of this kind of bidding backward and forward.
Anyway, when I came from Jamaica, I think I landed on a Friday, and church on Sunday, there was a program going to take place at the Peel Street Church of God of Prophecy in Winston Green that Sunday night. And my mom calmly told me sometime during Sunday that she had submitted my name to sing in the program. Now, to my knowledge, I had never sung on my own before, and I didn't know a song. I didn't practice any songs to sing, but my mother put my name up. So she obviously had some idea that there was a voice there why she did that, I assume. She was just proud of having her son having come up from Jamaica. I don't know. I was one of 11, so I don't think there's any special pride around me. Anyway, that Sunday night, my first Sunday in England, my name was called. And the only song I could think of singing was one I'd heard some people sing before I left Jamaica, just a few days before, of course, 106 from the Banner Hymns. Now, older Church of God of Prophecy people will know the Banner Hymns, okay, as well as Sankey and all the others, and later the Hymns of Glorious Praise. But if you have an old copy of the Banner Hymns, you look at number 106, and you'll see it there. Dear Jesus, I'm coming to see you someday. And so it goes. Jesus, I'm coming. Dear Jesus, I'm coming to see you someday. My life here so swiftly is passing away, but I will keep working and earnestly pray till time here on earth is no more. Jesus, I'm coming someday. Jesus, I'm now on my way. Jesus, I'm glad you will say, Jesus, I mean to be there. So I'd heard that song in Jamaica, and I just took the Banner Hymns. I went up, I sang. The musicians did what I realized they always do or did in that church, which is, you raise a song, they'll pick you up. Everybody, the whole band. And so before I knew it, the band was playing along with me singing. I sang all 3 verses, closed the book, went to sit down. My goodness, the place erupted in uproar. Encore, encore. I think I was anchored 3 or 4 times that night, singing 106 from the Banner Hymns. And they made a lot of money. From that day, 2.5 days into my stay, or 2 days into my stay in England, I was Joe Aldred the singer.
I recall we were in the Borsalith area of the city of Birmingham, and we were worshipping at a school hall called Tyndall Street School Hall. And I would have been about 5 or 6. We had musicians in the church. But I recall we had a kind of mini concert at the time. And my best friend at the time, looking back now, he was definitely a child prodigy. And his name was Wayne Williams. He still is alive now. And he was playing a 6-string guitar that was taller than him. And we were at the concert, and his sister was called on to sing, and there was just uproar. And I couldn't see what was going on. But by the time she had finished singing and they called her back on, I realized that the people that were there, they stood up watching him because they couldn't believe how a 7-year-old young boy could hold these notes and play the song inch perfect while his sister sung. And that resonated in me, and I thought, that's very, very interesting.
when I used to watch Wayne play and he used to roll that bass, that lick, repetitive style of playing. I've never heard that kind of playing anywhere, you know. I mean, I listen to the radio and all that, but he's been my influence from the start.
Certainly watching these guys play at conventions, be it district convention at, you know, Digbeth Civic Hall, when I wasn't running up and down as a kid and I was actually inside. Seeing these guys play was amazing. They just seemed like almost like untouchables. And certainly their instruments was, if we got anywhere close to their instrument, it was like, do not touch. It was like you just don't cross that line and touch these guys' instruments, which I guess as a kid added to the mystique. So, you know, like I said, Digbeth Town Hall, and the drums would always be set up to the left on a little rise, and you think, oh, you know, that looks cool. I remember Lesburn Easie as a drummer, you know, I remember his black kit, and he would have what seemed like a million toms, you know, going around it, but that was just his kit. And these guys, Wayne Williams as the bass player, heard him a little bit. I don't remember him as much, if I'm honest. But again, there was this mystique around the guy who sometimes played with gloves and would play over the top of the neck, and you think, and you hear these things and these stories, and it's like, you know, oh, you know, Wayne.
But I've got a son that I name after you. Yeah. Funny enough, Wayne. That's Wayne. It's
very humbling. I've got to say to hear this.
You know,
very humbling.
It's true. I named
really
a son
nice.
after Wayne because, you know, I looked upon him, you know, idly, you know, from my youth days, you know, playing, going to church, because, I mean, going to church was the thing, you know. Sometimes I used to be the first there. You know, I used to run, my brother used to come, we used to walk. I used to run and leave him. He said, why you always running and leaving me behind? You know, but he's just trying to get there and, you know, to get on the instrument and start playing.
And as mentioned before, Wayne Williams, absolutely amazing bass player and gifted musician. He could play the drums, he could play the guitar, he could play the bass guitar. He had an older brother called Arcee Williams. He was the maestro. And this is the guy that could read. And I remember one day, seeing him, he was the choir master, and he was also the music director, and he was teaching the choir a song. So I never heard the song before, and he was looking at his this book, and he was picking away, and I thought, what on earth is he doing? So I went up, bit challenged as I were at the time, and I said, good evening, Brother Oz, what are you doing? Because I looked down in the book, and all I could see was Chinese writing. So I thought, maybe he's learning Mandarin or something like that. I said, what are you doing, Brother Oz? He says, I'm learning the song. But I said, I don't see anything here. He said, oh. So I said, what are those? He said, these are the musical notes. Poor colored fool me. So he was the first person that could read music. This was talking about 68, 69, something like that, 67. Yeah. He could read the music. So he'd pick it out, get the tune, the melody, then he'd get the choir together, and they'd teach the harmonies, the 3-4 part harmonies. And we're one of the first churches to have a proper choir as well, yes. And we were, from my history certainly, the church in what then became George Street, we were the first church ever to have a concert anywhere in the Church of God of Prophecy.
Brother Ozzie Williams, who's a guitarist, and he played at George Street. Now, he wasn't from the Windrush generation, and I can't remember if he was born here or in Barbados, but guitar, it was ridiculous. That guy, the way he played, it was so full. And if Prophecy didn't have keyboard players, so they'd have 2 guitarists, and sometimes he'd be playing on his own, and he'd play and sing, and it was so full, you know. And you think, man, these guys, man, they were so blessed with their gift of music, and they used it to glorify God, and which is not a cliche, because every chord, every tone, if they changed a tone to get a different sound on the guitar, it was in worship, and that was reciprocated in the audience, because that's their motives and that's what they went to do. So that generation, E.A. McCalla, my godfather, absolutely inspired me also to play my drums, definitely.
There was not a lot of musicians until Trevor and you and Lesburn and all those came in. Most of those musicians in the 60s, they mostly play in conventions. Brighton and all those different places, they go with their music. But it's a sort of have maybe a little revival. You wouldn't find it's mostly tambourines, along with that banjo and things like that. But the broader aspect of the church is like conventions, all the musicians, them, even Hoswell, it would be more Brighton and them places.
Another thing I found when I came to England, in addition to birthing a singing career, which I must say a bit more in a minute, was that my dad played the double bass. So I didn't grow up with my dad, and in fact, first time I saw him to recognize him as my dad was when I came to England, and he met me at the airport with another man who drove, and I honestly didn't know which of the two of them was my dad. So that was me, my hello father. But what I discovered of him is that, as I said, he was a double bass player, and he played that for quite a while after I came to England with the rest of the musicians in church. After a while, though, as electric guitars started to take over and an electric bass was bought, he tried it and found he couldn't play it. With my basic knowledge of playing the guitar, I found it relatively straightforward to play the bass. So I became the bass player, and I, in fact, was the bass player at Peel Street Church of God of Prophecy for several years. So I was singing on the one hand, both solo and as part of a group, and I was playing the bass at church. Then younger things came up. Some of the young lads who watched me and others play, they started to have a go, and before long they were all better than me. So I remember Raymond Grant was, I think, the first one to take over the bass playing from me. Then others came along, the likes of Alvin Ewen, Josh McCalla, sadly now deceased, and others who have continued that tradition.
One of my first inspirations and watching as a bass player would be this man here. You know, and I remember back in the day when you got your Sunburst semi-acoustic that you called Lucy.
Right.
Yes.
You remember that?
Lucy, yeah. No lie, you couldn't make this up.
Wow.
And I remember just seeing him play. I remember you always played bass lines. You never just messed about and ad-libbed and blah, blah, blah. You do a little licks here and there, but there was always a solid line, And the tracks, you would just make tracks groove. Wow. And I never forgot that.
Wow.
Same with both of you as well, but you would be the first one that I really saw. And then watching Wayne at the town hall, I'm a little kid and he's up on the stage, him and Ozzy, and it's just like, wow. You know what I mean? Wow. And hearing that big bass sound, like I said, I don't know how you got away with that. You know what I mean? You know? And then later on, because Wayne, I love your style as well, playing bass lines, and then you wouldn't play anything for 2 or 3 notes, and then you suddenly come back here with it, and just like,
So, and if I was playing now, it would be exactly the same.
And that's fine.
Exactly the same, because that's a vibe that I still love.
At our church, you had A team musicians, B team musicians, and C team musicians. Right? This is very important. I think it's the same. A team musicians played on a Sunday, but they didn't have to come to Sunday school. They just turn up at Sunday school. The B team musicians would be there for Sunday school, hoping that the A team would right? And so just looking for that squeeze around a Sunday. And so as soon as the A-team members come through the door, they didn't have to say a word. B-team musicians just got up and moved out of the way. Right? So Dalton was a part of A-team musicians. And what I remember, and you play what you learn, you play what you hear, you play what you hear. And what I remember hearing from Dalton and Michael and I guess Woody was that they worked 1, 4 and 5.
Okay.
They worked those chords, honestly. So there was a power behind it. Behind 1, 4, they weren't in. I know some churches did like the major 7s and very softly, right? But in terms of what I remember hearing and has been the bedrock of my playing is working 1, 4 and 5 in terms of they just there was just a drive behind it. So they were my biggest influences. At the time I was just a singer. Because I was about 11 or something like that. But again,
just a singer.
I was just a singer.
Just a singer. There's nothing just a singer. What are you trying to say?
No. But the thing was, being here, and I said it earlier, it is kind of incredible because Dalton approached our pastor to say, I'd like to record an album, because Dalton was writing songs. And Pastor said, yeah, and he was executive producer, right, Pastor was, because given, I think the budget was around £500, and it was recorded here at Grosvenor.
That's good.
Wow. Seriously. Wow. And that was back in about 1978, round about there. And I remember singing, Dalton was playing, Carl McGregor was playing, Huey, Carl Kerr, our brother. But I was just singing, and one of the funny things was when the budget was running out, right? And Dalton's playing guitar and singing while I was recording, and there's one of the songs called "Peace, Perfect Peace" on the album, and Dalton, when he should have gone to the 1, went to the 2 minor, and I'm looking at him thinking, okay, he's gonna record this again. And as soon as the song finished, he said, that's it, that's the tape. And that's on the album. Oh. It's a great album, but that was the music I was growing up listening to Dalton, and Carl who played for Divine. He was in the B team, and Carl was so desperate to play, right? Carl used to turn up at prayer meeting just on a Thursday evening, you know, just to play. But my journey to playing was that Dalton, and Dalton has been one of the key figures because for all of us, really, because and whenever I get a chance to say it, I'll say it because it's a truth. That he was writing songs back in the 70s, recorded that album, that you don't realise that sets a mindset to say that we can write songs, you know, and Dalton bought a piano. My dad tried to teach me guitar, right, but I couldn't get my hands real different. So, but Dalton bought a piano and to the house at Earl Street. And I just fell in love with the piano, and I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember how I made that progression. All I remember is that the day I started, but then because within church, you just got on the music.
Fast forward, I was about the age of 12, and we had a drummer in the church, but he played like marching kind of drumming thing, and the old man. And I think he was a bus driver at the time, so he went to work. And Wayne said to me, just play. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, so he showed me a little beat. And he said, do you think you could do that? I said, I don't know, this was just before church. So he showed me, and I did it. And it felt right. There was something about it. And he was saying, do it again, and I did it again. I thought it was fluke, and I did it again. Then he showed me something else and I did it again. Then church started. So I just sat in church. And he said, no, you got to come. So I had to go up and play in church right there, right then. And the rest is history.
Brother A was playing guitar and Brother Martin. They not being funny, but they weren't very good. They could only play a few chords, you know. So then my dad knew a guitarist. And he was better than them guys. But when he came and saw me play, and the first time he just saw me the once, because I had a good ear, when I heard a chord, I'd sit down and I could play it. So when I started putting my chords together, he could only play the basic chords. So when me and him were jamming, and he was kind of stopping me, what's that chord? what's that called? And as like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and he's a big man, and he's kind of asking you, and he's supposed to be teaching you.
For me, growing up, my introduction to guitar really was watching their son, which Wycliffe Purchase, which is still alive. I think he lives in London, lives in central London. I think I bumped into him not before the lockdown. And my recollection as a youngster, I remember listening to him every week, because, you know, church, as a youngster, I had to go every week, like the rest of the family. And so I went, you know, trying to get a seat next to him so I could see him playing. And it's not like today, where when I look at today, if someone is interested in music, their parents normally try and find somebody who's into music and try and get their sons or daughters, might pay for lessons, which I've done with my girls. But back then it wasn't that, you know. So for me, I'm looking at him, I'm watching him play every week. And then on my 8th birthday, my sister Jane took me to the toy shop in the market in West Bromwich, indoor market, and said I could have anything I wanted. I remember looking up, trying to find something as an 8-year-old, and I saw this little ukulele. And you know, and obviously it's something big. Ukulele is tiny, but for an 8-year-old, it was a big thing, because parents weren't that for buying you anything. But my sister bought me a ukulele, and I think that's where my journey started. You know, they're trying to turn it into something, whilst every week going to church and watching Wycliffe plays.
And then as I was getting older, I remember having the opportunity to buy some drumsticks, and bought some drumsticks. And then Bunny Dryden told me, you need to get yourself a practice pad. And then he told me what one looked like, and he showed me his, because I knew Bunny from back in the day. We went to the same church. I got a practice pad, and Bunny was the one who said, get your pillow, that's your snare. You know, get your pillow there, that can be a hi-hat, your snare's there, and that could be a tom, and your bass drum is on the floor. And that's what I did. Listen, me and my brother used to love listening to music, so I used to be in my bedroom, I used to listen to Robbie Vincent on the radio, and listen to all the artists like Aretha Franklin, Luther Vandross, Minnie Riperton, all those artists. I used to just listen to music. And the way how I learned drums, I never had one formal drum lesson in my life. Self-taught, literally listening to what was happening on the drums. But I wouldn't just listen to the drums, I'd always listen to what the bass player was doing, or the keyboardist, or the vocals. I just loved music.
I'm 9. My dad says to me, I said to my dad, I'd like to play the guitar. So he gets me a guitar. He also gets me an encyclopedia, because I was given encyclopedias as well. So I'm very much into history, geography, physics, maths, English, very much into them subjects. So I get a whole lot of encyclopedias and the guitar from a Christmas present. Imagine that. Everybody's getting toys and Action Man and bikes. I get encyclopedias and an acoustic guitar. So obviously I studied the two of them, got into the two of them. So regarding my guitar now, no help from my dad. There was no encouragement until when he realised my cousin was getting good. When my cousin Jeffrey Kennedy started to get good, and I was hanging with Jeffrey, sort of thinking, okay, showing a bit of interest. I would ask my dad for a guitar. No. So what I'd done, a friend of mine at church had an acoustic guitar, and back in the day, he had these little pickups that you could clip to your acoustic guitar, and it would kind of turn it into an electric guitar. Yeah, because it was like this pickup. You put the pickup on the guitar. He gave it to me. He said, "Oh, you can have this." I said, "Oh, thank you." Attached it to my guitar. So my acoustic guitar is now an electric guitar, and I'm playing bass now. So I can be heard now in church. You get me? So I'm playing in church again. It's only probably tambourine and some guitars running, but you can now hear the bass because I'm playing some lines and stuff. My dad's going, "Oh, okay." I would even say, you know, he didn't really encourage. Mum was never really there because Mum's not really the encouraging type. But it's only when I started to play with my cousin Jeff and they saw, oh, Don, you know, he's really got an interest. So one Christmas, my dad bought me this bass. To this day, I don't know what the bass was called because it had no name. It was a mess, but it was an electric bass and it was mine and I played it. It was an embarrassing bass because the guy that owned it, it was a red bass, but he painted it black. How do I know that? Because you could see he used like gloss paint, so you could see the whole red paint underneath, this black gloss that he used to paint. So imagine in concerts now, I'm like 12 playing in concert with this ugly looking bass. But people are like, I'm so not right though. I'm so not right.
I would class church as our musical university because we weren't, so a lot of us weren't officially taught. We were self-taught, but yet we could play to a standard to some of those guys that have been to uni and played music, but they didn't have the feel that we had.
What for me remains a significant thing, which is the way we used to practice our rehearsal routine. It was intensive. I learned later that Bob Marley, before he became famous, spent many months, if not years, gigging on the continent before anybody really knew him. And what people who used to work with him then say is what a taskmaster he was. He would never allow them to leave the studio, the rehearsal studio, until he had the tune, the song, absolutely how he wants it. And so that meant that they ended up going home sometimes in the morning because he would never. So people know him when he gets famous, but actually what led to that fame was the intensity of his practice, his rehearsal, and the perfectionism that he brought. Well, my group, the Spiritual Rhythm with Gloria Brown and the others I've mentioned, we never hit those heights, but we certainly had the work ethic about practice.
Church was at the core of our family. So we would have to wake up in the mornings for prayer meetings, whether we wanted to or not. Dad was keen. He was the deacon of the church at the time. And, you know, he was quite a strict father. My mum was strict as well. But again, it was about us understanding who we were as family and the importance of family and the importance of faith within our family. And again, it was something that it didn't feel pressurized to me. It just felt quite natural to be growing up in those kind of surroundings.
I just went to church because my parents told me I had to go to church. I was living under their roof, so I had to go to church. But later on in life, again, I realized how important that was to me as a person, as an individual. Gave me my morals, gave me my standards, grounded me really, really well.
You know, at the moment, I'm in a senior position in a government department, and where I see people who are having difficulty in relating to people and presenting to large audiences, I see people almost passing out. You know, you've got to give a presentation in a team meeting to 7 people, and they pass out. And our background is, you know, 500, 1,000 people. And it is the church platform that developed that.
Foundation, big time.
All those presentation opportunities, singing at programs, singing on Sundays, we were quite au fait, we were quite confident in front of people as a consequence, which forever will be my big fist up to church. It gave me the presentation skills for the rest of my life. And what I've realised is that the school side of things I don't think that many teachers were expecting us to have the skills that we had and to have the confidence that we had. So whether
Read them away.
whether you wanted to go to church or not, church actually upskilled us. It was the extracurricular.
100%.
Each of us are comfortable as well in terms of presenting, because it gives you that confidence to present, to be able to project your voice as well. And we look back at many of the people that we've sung with, that we grew up with and we sung with, each of them are in management roles, presenting, managing, coordinating. And some of these skills come from, and disciplines, not that I was very disciplined, so I struggled in management. But
won't say no more.
No.
You couldn't ad-lib your way out to that.
I did run a few lyrics, I must admit. Did win the crowd over.
I didn't even like singing as a child. I know, that sounds really...
Wow.
I didn't even like singing, and I'll tell you why. Simply because I've got a deepish voice. And when I was at school in Palfrey Juniors, when they used to form the little singing things for whatever activity they were doing at school, they used to put me with the boys, because I couldn't sing way up there with the other kids, and they used to put me with the boys who couldn't sing. So I used to go home in tears singing, I'm not singing ever again. And then there was a friend of ours, my sisters, I've got older sisters, I'm the youngest in my family. And she'd been living in America and she'd come back to the UK. And she formed a choir from our young people, which involved my sisters. They were called the Commissioners, and they were really good. She formed harmonies, she taught us harmonies, or taught them. And my sister Elaine at the time, she said, she learned alto. And Elaine says to me, this is what you're try practicing with us and singing what I sing. And from that day, I realised where my voice fitted in, and I started singing alto. And I just loved it, to the point where I was singing harmonies to adverts on the TV. And then I started listening to Levine Hudson. Started listening to Levine Hudson, not realising my voice was starting to stretch more and more, because I fell in love with her voice as a youngster, and my voice started to stretch and stretch more. And then I was in the Joy Bells in church, and they taught us alto in the Joy Bells, which was really good, because we felt like, myself and my friend Marsha felt like we were singing big people harmony, because you got the counterpart. Yeah. So we were singing Church in the Valley of the Wildwood, and all me and Marsha had to sing was come, 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 come. And we felt really grown up singing that alto, like, come, come, come. And we was thinking, yeah, this is our part, this is. And from there I started to fall in love with singing with the Joy Bells. Eventually I got older and I could join the older choir. And it just took off from there.
Apart from listening to reggae on a Sunday with Erskine Tea, was at school. And it was at school that I met musicians such as Lester Davis, who's resting, praise the Lord, and Selwyn Howe, another great guitarist, Errol Howe, good guitarist. And these were the guys that I was listening to. And one of the main influences in my life was Elvis Campbell, who was a part of the Bethel Apostolic Church, Gibson Road, great guitarist. He was a multi-instrumentalist. He played guitar, he played bass, he played keyboards, he played drums. And I was just so impressed by this guy's ability. And we formed a little group at school. This was back in 1973. And we used to do some assemblies. And the first one we did was This Little Light of Mine, and then we went on to do a bit more complex material, like Bob Marley's Waiting in Vain, so we did that with some other musicians and singers at school.
I remember my first day at Handsworth Wood Boys School, and we made a beeline finding out where the music department was, and then there was a teacher there, Mr. Fraser, black teacher, Mr. Fraser, and yeah, and the music department, and I said to my form tutor at the time, sir, when can I go and have a look at the music department? And me and Dennis was in the same form, and we went break time and we knocked on the door and we told Mr. Fraser. Dennis says, I play the piano, and Mr. Fraser says, well, let me hear you. So Dennis started to play and he says, oh, you're talented. You're really, really talented. And he says, what do you play? And I says, I play the drums. And he says, oh, we got a drum kit here. And I'm like, what? You got a drum kit? So this was my first experience of playing a drum kit. So Mr. Fraser set up this drum kit for me, and respect and thanks to Bunny Dryden telling me, remembering my bass drum, snare, hi-hat and my tom. The kit was set up and I literally went on there, Dennis was playing and I just started to play drums. And me and Dennis continued, and Dennis says, now that you've got a proper drum kit, we can actually start, playing together. And then we went to, so we was at Handsworth Wood Boys School, and then we met up with another guy, and his name was Robin Watson.
Myself, Dennis and Dave. I'm just trying to think what we call ourselves, but anyway.
He was interested in playing bass. He was mad about Abraham Laborio and a bass player called Jaco Pastorius. And his brother, I knew of his brother, Vindel Watson, he was one of the go-to drummers at church, one of the guys you look up to. And I was fortunate that I had a couple of drum instructions from Vindel. So I just want to say thank you to Vindel, because he kind of steered me in the right direction in terms of tips, and Bunny did as well, to be fair. But yeah, so we got together. It was me, Dennis and Robin.
3 guys from an inner city school, Handsworth Wood Boys School, which is where we went.
But every time we could get a rehearsal after school, we'd always just jam and play together. So Mr. Fraser said, there's a school thing coming up at the town hall. How would you guys like to kind of play there? And I kind of said, yeah, you know what, that'd be cool, man.
And when we got to this venue, the music teacher hadn't told us that everybody else there, they're all from, public schools private schools and things like that. So it's a real mixture. We were obviously from an inner city school. It was obvious the way we were dressed. We weren't just scraggy, but we were just different. Everyone else was in jackets and what have you. Anyway, long story short, we played our tunes, and I have got this on cassette as well. And we played and we did our thing, and we just let rip. And literally we hit the final note and we stopped, and it was dead silence for like a split second, what felt like an eternity. And then the place just blew up. They all started cheering and clapping, and it was great. For us, that was a big deal, because we went in as guys from an inner city, looking back, guys from Handsworth going into Birmingham Town Hall with all these other schools like King Edward's and people like that. And we did our thing, and that was cool, and that was fun.
And, myself and Robin and Dennis kept playing together. But, when we left school, Dennis kind of went his own way, and he kind of really took off and started playing for a lot of reggae artists. So he was playing for a lot of reggae bands, doing music full time. And I think he was just recently playing on that production for the Windrush production. He was the keyboard player for the Windrush, so he's still out there, and he did kind of hail me and says, we've got to get back together and have a bit of a reunion.
When I was like 4 or 5 years old, from when my memory takes me back to then. So I looked at my dad as back then as if he was a god to me, and everything he did, I wanted to aspire to do the same he did. So when we came back to the UK, we went to a church back in the day, back in the late 70s it was, and they had bass players, but they didn't have any keyboard players, and I wanted to play keyboards, so I started having a keyboard lesson from a guy named Gladstone Wilson, and he was, for me back in those days, the man on keys. Most people would know him, so I started having lessons with him, but my dad had a different idea. He said, he went to this music shop, took me to the music shop, and there's me thinking he's going to be buying me a keyboard, because that's what I aspire to play. Never knew my dad went and picked this bass guitar. Bass guitar, what the difference between ivory to strings. Never picked up a bass in my life, and he just said, hey, play this in church. Just as simple as that. So that's where my musical journey started, and I used to sit down in my bedroom until 4 a.m. in the morning, learning the Walter Hawkins, the Edwin Hawkins, and the Winans tracks.
So that's how I actually started playing bass.
On my 8th birthday, my sister Jane took me to the toy shop in the market in West Bromwich, indoor market, and said I could have anything I wanted. I remember looking up, trying to find something as an 8-year-old, and I saw this little ukulele. And you know, and obviously it's something big. Ukulele is tiny, but for an 8-year-old, it was a big thing because parents weren't that for buying you anything. But my sister bought me a ukulele, and I think that's when my journey started. You know, they're trying to turn it into something whilst every week going to church and watching Wycliffe play.
Mum bought me a guitar, my first guitar, from the catalogue. Back in the day, you could get a catalogue, look through the catalogue, purchase your items, and then pay week over week. And that's how I had my first guitar. So then there was a band starting to come together. So there was Dolphus, Caleb, and there was Harvey. There was also Len, the pastor's son. He used to play guitar as well. And there was me. And I always remember there used to be a challenge, close on fighting to get to church first so we could plug in the amplifier. And if you didn't get there on time, if Len got there before me or Dolphus got there before me, there wasn't enough inputs so you had to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait.
I remember the first time my dad said, okay, I'm going to buy you an electric guitar. And I said, yeah, I want a Fender, Dad. And I'll never forget the first thing he said to me, Fender is something will go punk here. What do you mean Fender? I said, no, Dad, it's a Fender Strat. I want a Strat. And he said, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. So we went to the shop, Jones and Croslands, it was called in town. And he walked into the shop and I said, those are the Fenders there. Had a whole row of them queued up on stands. And he went over, looked at the ticket, £370. And he just walked straight back out of the shop. And I thought, that was it. I thought that was my chance, finished. And funnily enough, a week later, he took me back to the shop and said, I'm going to get the guitar. I was like, you're going to get me a Fender? This was in the 70s. And it was £360 in the 70s, which was like, I worked it out now that I didn't know at the time, but it was like a month's salary at the time. This is a working class family. We weren't rich. My dad worked at Leyland at the time. And he saw something enough in me to commit that type of money to get me that guitar. I've still got the guitar to this day. I'll never get rid of it. But he went into that shop, and I remember the guy said, it's £360. And my dad said, typical Jamaican, I'm not paying that for it. I got 300 cash. And the guy said, sorry, sir, they're £360. He goes, I got cash. And the guy said, I'm sorry. He said, I can't do it. £300 is not enough. And my dad picked up the money, and I was tugging at his coat going, Dad, please, don't walk out. And he was going, shh. And he picked up the money, put it in his breast pocket. By the time we got to the door, I heard the guy go, Sir, hold on a sec. Let me speak to my manager. And he went back, spoke to the manager. He goes, I think we can do it for £300. And my dad said, see, cash talk. And he got the guitar. Then he said to the guy, as they used to do, they put in a cardboard box, and the guy said, there you go. And he goes, nah, this needs a case. And the guy goes, well, the cases are like £60. And it needs a case. £60? He goes, no, I need the case. Really? For £300? I was going, oh no. In the end, long story short, my dad got the case and the guitar for £300. And he walked out of the shop and he said to me, you see how things I don't know? That's how you bargain, cash talk. Don't say nothing but make the cash talk. And I learned a lesson from my dad that day, that you never buy anything at full price.
My name's Gloria Stewart by birth. I am the 7th member of the Singing Stewarts. Our family came to England. My dad came first. He came in 1960, and 9 months later, my mum came with the rest of us. At that time, it was 7 children. I was the youngest then. We came from Trinidad. Actually, my parents were both born in Grenada, but left Grenada when they were very little and moved to Trinidad, where I was born and where they grew up. They went to school together and they were always together, my parents. And they married and had us. They had, let me see, my eldest brother, Oscar, and the first 4 children, there were 8 of us all together, but the first 4 children were born in Trinidad. Then for economic reasons, for work, my dad had to go, he went to Aruba, where he worked, and 2 of my brothers were born in Aruba, and I was nearly born there, but 9.5 months pregnant my mum was when they moved back. Daddy's contract had finished, so they moved back to Trinidad, where I was born. When I was 5, we left Trinidad and came to England. But like I said, my dad came first. He came in 1960, and then 9 months later we followed.
Clarendon. Mm-hmm.
Anywhere particularly in Clarendon?
Morgan's Pass. Mm-hmm.
And which school did you go to?
Light of the Valley.
Light of the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
How did you do in that school?
I did well, you know. I finished school in my 6th form, and then I took my exam. I went to first year to go to take my exam. Obviously, I took the first year exam, and at the time I was 16 when I took that exam. Then I got saved when I was 17. And my father never wanted me to be saved. So he told me if I'm still going to church, he's not sending me back for my 2nd year. So obviously, I determined not to go back from the Lord. So I never took the 2nd year, because in Jamaica, you've got to be paying for exams, books and everything. So obviously when he says that, I made up my mind that I prefer to continue serving the Lord than to take my 2nd year. My ambition at school, I always would love to be a nurse, but at least I never get the chance there. But I started teaching at home. I did a private school with about 40 odd children at the age of 5. And when they became 7, then they go to the elementary school. And from that elementary school, if there's any backward children, the teacher always sent them to me. Because my children, they were so advanced that I was teaching. And so obviously, the teacher and I connected, though it was private. But at the time, the MHR, which was Mr. Bradrick, he was running election, and he said if he had won the election, he would have allowed me to go in the basic school under the government.